Hello and happy MRT week. My name is Martha Sprengel. I'm one of your friendly neighborhood MRI techs, and today we will be traveling through time during my presentation from Proton to Pixel, the history of MRI. Now, before we get into all of the scientific discoveries, it will be helpful for us to get a little basic understanding of how an MRI machine works. Many of you may have had an MRI or have seen it on TV. And here we have a really basic diagram of the main components of an MRI machine. The MRI looks like a long donut or a tube, and we have the main magnet. Magnet is always on. Here at CHIO we have a 1.5 Tesla strength and a 3 Tesla strength magnet. Each of these magnets is always on, which is why we are so careful about who is able to come into our department and why we diligently screen all of our patients before they are allowed to enter the magnet room. Now there are a few types of coils in an MRI scanner. We have the gradient coils and the radiofrequency coils, which are used to create the images. Of course, we have the opening, which we call the bore, and the table for a patient to lie on, and a third kind of coil. Now these coils are placed around the body part that we image. So here we have little flexible coils we can wrap around an elbow or place on the chest for SC joints or sternum. A boot coil looks like a little boot. You put your foot and ankle in it, foot and ankle coil, and a head and neck coil, kind of like a hockey helmet, for imaging the head, neck, and spine. And of course, we couldn't have an MRI system without a computer. Not only for us technologists to view the images, to enter our patient data, to send our pictures to PACS, but to convert the signal that we receive from the MRI machine into the images that we see on the screen. How does the MRI work? As I mentioned before, our MRI scanner has an inherent strong magnetic field, whether here at CHIO it's 1.5 Tesla or 3 Tesla. The entire concept of an MRI on a human revolves around hydrogen. A significant portion of our bodies is composed of water, and of course H2O. There are 2 hydrogen atoms in a water molecule. So when we take images of a body part, we are manipulating the hydrogen atoms in the water in our bodies. So when you lie down and enter the magnet, the strong inherent magnetic field causes all of the hydrogen atoms in your body to line up in the same direction. Hydrogen atoms act like a little magnet. Any atom that has an uneven number of protons will line up with the magnetic field. Hydrogen has 1 proton, so it lines up with the magnetic field. We then send radio waves from the MRI machine, and these cause the atoms to move perpendicular to the main magnetic field. And as these radio waves are turned off, the atoms will return to their original position, and as they do, they induce a signal or a current in a coil that's placed around the body part that's being imaged, in one of these little fellas. These signals are received by a computer and converted into the image. MRI stands for magnetic resonance imaging, and it was originally actually named nuclear magnetic resonance because of the resonating of the nuclei of the hydrogen atoms. Now, our story starts all the way back in 1891 with Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla invented the Tesla coil, which is an electrical transformer which uses high-frequency alternating current to increase voltage. Now this is relevant to us because one of the key principles of the Tesla coil is resonance. Magnetic resonance imaging. Now we jump from 1891 all the way to 1938 with Isidor Rabi. And he discovers that nuclei of atoms can resonate. Here in this little picture, we have a spinning hydrogen nucleus. So their types of movements are either called spinning, wobbling, or precessing. They're sort of spinning on an axis. And what Rabi discovers is that magnetic resonance can occur in a nucleus when that nuclei is in a strong constant magnetic field and it is disturbed by a weak oscillating field at the same frequency that it precesses or spins at. And this will produce an electromagnetic signal. Now, Rabbi performs his experiments in a quote-unquote unnatural context, in a vacuum. So he is credited with this discovery, but it was practically applied in a more quote-unquote natural context by Bloch and Purcell, Felix Bloch and Edvard Purcell, in 1952. In 1959, Jerome R. Singer proposes that nuclear magnetic resonance can be used to measure blood flow in the body. And this is a concept that we still use today. This is an image of all the blood vessels in the brain, or magnetic resonance angiography. And this is a concept that we use every day in MRI today with magnetic resonance angiographies. Next, we move up to 1971 with Raymond Damadian, who discovers that some tumors show elevated relaxation times compared to the normal tissues. He also coins the acronym FONAR, which is Field Focused Nuclear Magnetic Resonance. He also names his company FONAR, which still creates MRI systems today. One of the difficult parts of looking up the history of MRI is that all of this research was happening simultaneously in different parts of the world. We'll see Raymond Damadian come up again. In 1973, Paul Lodeber proposes that you could use the magnetic field gradients to determine the location that the signal is coming from in the body. He calls this zeugmatography, unfortunately a name that did not stick. Today we call this concept frequency encoding. We have Paul here, and this is Big Red, Paul's experimental MRI. You can see him again here with a patient inside. In 1974, Peter Mansfield creates a mathematical method to convert these signals into images. This is based on Fourier, Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier, who was a mathematician and physicist in the late 1700s to early 1800s. He also invents selective excitation, which is where you can target your RF pulses to a specific slice of the body instead of the whole body part. We move up to 1975. Richard Ernst invents 2D Fourier transform imaging. This is essentially a mathematical equation which allows the image data to be mapped on an XY axis. In 1977, we get the first human image credited to Damadian. Supposedly, it took almost 5 hours to produce one image, a scan of his colleague Larry Minkoff's thorax. Damadian also named his first MRI scanner the Indomitable. In 1978, Ian Robert Young and Hugh Clow publish the first image of a brain MRI. And in 1980, William Edelstein and James Hutchison developed the first practical method for 2D Fourier transform that Richard Ernst invented. The first commercial clinical MRI was called Neptune, a 0.15 Tesla installed in the Hammersmith Hospital in London, England. And 3 years later, in 1984, General Electric introduces high-field 1.5 Tesla systems, which is quite the jump from a 0.15 Tesla all the way to 1.5. In the 1990s, the technology continued to advance. Faster and faster imaging techniques are being created. The coils placed on the body part, like the boot coil and the head coil, their technology is improved with phased array technology. This data is not particularly up to date, but in 2015 there were over 35,000 scanners worldwide. And here we have images of our Siemens 3 Tesla Magnetom Skyra MRI and our brand new GE 1.5 Signa. This concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the physics and the history of MRIs. And happy MRT week!